Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, Derek got a fun and exciting video for you guys today because I'm playing Souvalou on MAME. This is a Namco System 21 game, and for the longest time, if you try to run it in MAME, including MAME 287, you get about 45 seconds into the gameplay until the game would crash with an error message and you couldn't go any further. But as of today, on GitHub commits for the code, you can play Souvalou from start to finish, and that absolutely is amazing because it's one of the best Namco System 21 games of its era. Now before we get too far involved, do be aware that this video is going to have a lot of flashing lights because every time the ship gets hit, it basically turns into a strobe effect. So if that bothers you, maybe don't watch this one. And also before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps me out. But honestly, getting something like Souvalou 100% working in MAME is absolutely spectacular, because if you know where there's an arcade cabinet for this one, please tell me down below. I have never actually seen a cabinet for this one in my life. It's one of those things. Starblade I've definitely seen, but this one just remains a mystery to me personally. So something like MAME, keeping these games alive is absolutely spectacular, and again, with the new improvements in the Namco System 21 emulation, you're finally going to be able to play this one. Now, MAME has obviously gone to at least a bi-monthly release schedule, so this is something, if you want to play it today, you'll have to pop over to the MAME GitHub page and download some of the commit artifacts. They are called artifacts, and you will need to be logged into a GitHub account to be able to get them, but basically, if you don't want to wait for MAME to release the mainline version, and for most people I do recommend you wait, this is something that you can always try out today. And honestly, in my experience with this game, I've never played it in real life, so it's really hard to say if it's working perfectly or not, but if it isn't, I would have absolutely no idea whatsoever. And there are those flashing lights, so again, if that bothers you, you have been warned about them. At least they don't have a low health sounding warning on this one like a lot of the other Namco arcade games of this era do, because that absolutely drives me nuts, where flashing lights don't really bother me that much. Now, as far as Souvalou is concerned, it is a 3D shmup. Kind of feels a little bit like Space Harrier in 3D, and Planet Harrier before that game would ever come out. And the nice thing is, it does have a decent continue system. You do have to get to checkpoints, but this isn't one of those games where you basically have to beat it in one sitting, which some of the other Namco System 21 games, Galaxian 3 being the specific one, force you to basically beat the game or start over from scratch. And you do have a decent amount of range of motion here as well. You can move your ship around in 3D and actually move the camera. Yes, you're technically on rails, but those rails have a lot of wiggle room, and that is a really fun gameplay kind of loop. And really, there's just something about this era of graphics. I was definitely not playing arcade games when this game came out. Basically, I was probably trying to learn how to walk, but it's one of those things. I absolutely love going back to them because of the fact that they aren't texture mapped. They really do age well, and all of the ships you see that are flying around are actually sprites with a really nice, almost pre-rendered look, so it makes it look like it's 3D, but they really have a very nice vibe going on to them as well. Now, if you take a look at the top of the screen, it's a very weird configuration. All of those little icons to the left and right of the ship are going to be your shields. Once those are depleted, the next hit you take is going to kill you. So it does use a lot of screen real estate just to indicate health, but maybe that actually benefited the Namco System 21 hardware, because it isn't drawing as many pixels as if you just put the health bar over top the actual 3D gameplay. Because everything you're seeing in Souvalou outside of some of the sprite enemies is 100% done in polygons. All of the environments, all of the enemies, minus those sprites, and that couldn't have been an easy thing to accomplish back when this board actually came out, because honestly 3D arcade gaming was still in its infancy, and the fact that it looks this good and runs this smoothly is a testament not only to the MAME emulation but also to the development of the Namco System 21 in general. And these are games that definitely aren't as fondly remembered for some reason compared to Sega Model 1 games, which have a very equivalent look. You put something like this up against something like Virtual Racing or Virtual Fighter, and those games are still talked about to this day, where something like Souvalou definitely deserves more attention. But I think the fact is this never really got ported home. It wasn't able to be emulated for forever, so maybe people would love this one as much as they love something like Virtual Fighter, even though it isn't a completely different genre, if they were actually able to play it. And like I said, up until the point in time that this commit hit, you weren't able to play this one, but now you can sit down, enjoy it from start to finish, and that's absolutely insane. But we're going to go into the first of two soundtrack samples because I love the music in this game as well. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, but I'll be right back with more gameplay. Super fun, almost 1970s sci-fi space opera soundtrack, and it sounds like one of the sound effects basically seems to be a mouse squeaking, at least that's how I hear it, and a lot of bubble sound effects as well, but it definitely has an entire audio soundscape from the soundtrack to the sound effects that basically makes it feel very futuristic. And in some ways, if you think about Sega's Star Wars arcade on the Sega Model 1, Souvalou kind of feels like the Namco equivalent to that, except with a lot more colors. I think that really is what benefits this game and still makes it feel fresh and modern today. These untextured polygons just have the ability to age so well, and honestly, if you released a game that had these vibes and overall polygons today, maybe even in VR, and just called it a retro throwback or a stylized version of a modern game, I think it'd actually get a lot of people gravitating towards that. And it's one of those things, obviously we can't really run MAME arcade games in virtual reality, but this would be the perfect type of game to do it if we could, because it just has this overall motion to the camera, this smooth panning that I think would really work well in VR. But honestly, this is just a big emulation win because, again, anytime a game that you couldn't play before is suddenly made playable, that means for the rest of time, anyone who wants to experience this is going to be able to do so. And that is something, if you watch the channel, you know I always advocate for, the preservation of rare games. And if you want to play this one, I can't recommend enough. Don't try to shoot everything in front of you when there's a lot of projectiles on screen. Just basically loop your ship around in a circle, trying to stay ahead of those projectiles. And if you have a flight stick like I do for games like this, I can't recommend enough. Definitely hook it up. It feels a hell of a lot better than an analog stick. And as we go into the ship here again, definite big Star Wars vibes on this one, except that all takes place in a bright, cheery atmosphere with a very blue sky, and I think that actually benefits it. And honestly, if those aren't just the Amiga balls from the Amiga operating system, I do not know what they are. But if you have played this game in arcades, leave me a comment down below because I would be curious. Like I said, even though I played a metric crap ton of arcade cabinets in my time, there are just some games that for some reason or another escaped me and I never actually got a chance to see. And this is definitely one I would love to play on an original arcade cabinet sometime in the future. And I've definitely tried to look around for a PCB on this one, but every time I see it for sale, maybe more expensive than I kind of want to play, and it's not a small PCB either. So a lot of times my purchasing decisions come down to not only price, but also the space that I have to put them into a condo in Chicago with. But that's kind of the thing when you live in a city, sometimes PCB space can be limited, and that is also why emulation is incredible. You don't have to have a massive 5,000 square foot complex to be able to hold all the arcade games you'd ever love to own. Although in reality, if I could get that to work, I would absolutely do it. But Souvalou is just one of those special games that really showed the promise of what 3D arcade gaming was going to be, and 3D gaming in general. And unlike some other 3D arcade games back in the day that felt more like tech demos, just to wow and impress you and get your quarters, this one has an amazing game attached to it, and I love it for that. But we're going to do one more soundtrack sample because, again, the music in this game, 10 out of 10 fun and weird in all the best ways. And I'll be right back to explain where you can find the link to get this one. Again, just a 10 out of 10 soundtrack that really has that space opera vibe going really hard, and that's one that I've loved from both film and television as well as video games. Now, if you want to play around with this sort of stuff, if you go to the MAME GitHub page that I've linked down below, and you go to Actions, anything with a green icon is a successful build. If you click into that and you're logged into GitHub, you will see artifacts from that build, and those will be downloadable versions of MAME. So go ahead and look for Namco System 21 or anything else you want to play around with and give it a try. Just be aware that these are just basically commits that are done automatically when code is committed to the MAME project. There is no support for them, and don't open any issue tickets until there is a new version of MAME, because it's one of those things. These are just basically work products and they aren't for general release, but you can play around with them because that's how GitHub works. But as of today, Souvalou is playable from start to finish, and I'm absolutely stoked for that because another rare arcade game made playable for everyone for all time is definitely a win. Sure to that. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but I'll see you guys next time. And trust me, play this game. Bye-bye.